Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources, the narratives, and the context and extract the knowledge you need to be truly well-informed.
Today, we are opening a particularly complex file. It's centered on a nurse, Bess Crawford, and her absolute, almost existential commitment to fulfilling a promise made in the shadow of the First World War.
And this is a deep dive into A Duty to the Dead, a story that I think just beautifully and, well, brutally illustrates how the psychological pressure of war, it doesn't just crush the soldiers at the front.
No, it exposes and destroys the rot that has been festering inside these, seemingly perfect families on the home front for years. We're following Bess's journey from a sinking ship in the Mediterranean right into the dark, decade-old secret of a privileged English family, the Grahams.
So our mission today is really to map out this timeline precisely. We want to understand the profound contradiction at the heart of the Graham family.
How they maintain this facade of heroism and high society while actively covering up a vicious murder and sacrificing one of their own.
Exactly. We'll trace the line from a simple deathbed whisper in November 1916 all the way to the shocking truth of betrayal and murder, focusing on the subtle clues and, those devastating moments that propel Bess's investigation.
Let's get into it.
Okay, so I think it's crucial we begin with the state Bess is in when this duty is assigned to her. It's November 1916. She is a highly trained nurse, but she's not near the trenches. She's at sea.
Right, she's serving on a hospital ship, and this particular assignment puts her right into, well, the unexpected front line of naval warfare.
The setting is absolutely pivotal for understanding her later. I guess you'd call it an obsessive commitment.
It really is. She is aboard the Britannic, the massive, luxurious sister ship to the Titanic, which was serving as a floating hospital, and she knew that ship well. She'd sailed on it many times.
And then, on the morning of November 21st, near the Greek island of Kea, the danger that felt so distant suddenly becomes terrifyingly real.
Terrifyingly real. The ship was struck. It was unclear initially if it was a German U-boat torpedo or a stray mine around 8 in the morning.
The immediate details of the sinking are just horrific. They really underscore the raw chaos of that environment.
They do. Bess noticed the ship felt sluggish, and then the reports came flooding in. And the decision to try and steer this massive vessel toward Kea using its own screws because the rudder was out. I mean, Dr. Patterson's grim assessment made the situation feel hopeless very, very quickly.
And that attempt to steer is what led directly to the worst part of the sinking, right?
It did. The worst tragedy. In the immediate panic, some lifeboats were launched early, without direct orders, and they were way too close to the massive churning screws of the struggling ship.
Oh, no.
And Bess witnessed the terrifying aftermath. She described seeing, quote, wood debris and torn bodies churned into the bloody wake.
I mean, that's a spectacle of carnage she had never seen, not even dealing with the most severely wounded men from Gallipoli or the Somme.
Exactly. That sight, the torn bodies, is the kind of acute trauma that stays with a person forever. And on top of that visceral horror, Bess was physically injured during the rescue.
Right, her arm.
Her arm. Earlier, Dr. Menzies had noticed a probable simple fracture in her arm from being jostled. But while she was scrambling to rescue a critically injured Irish nurse named Eileen,
who was clinging to a piece of wreckage.
right in the freezing water, Bess just exerted herself far beyond what the injury could handle. She felt a stab of, as she put it, exquisite pain as the fracture turned compound.
Wow.
She later described this sensation as intense, leading to immediate nausea. She had to improvise a sling from her apron just to keep going.
That compound fracture, it's like a physical manifestation of her survival guilt, isn't it? She keeps working, helping haul Eileen aboard until they're finally taken to Piraeus.
And the sinking claimed 30 men. So Bess, because of the severity of her arm, was eventually ordered home to England to recuperate.
And this creates the essential psychological context for the whole plot.
It really does. Bess felt profoundly guilty. Not just that the sinking happened, but that she was not serving at the front, and especially that she couldn't immediately deliver this message she'd been given.
Her father, the colonel, he kind of put his finger on it later.
He did. He articulated this feeling perfectly when he noted that if she had died on the Britannic, the duty could never have been fulfilled. So the promise becomes this absolute moral imperative for her. It's a way to justify her survival and combat the guilt of being removed from service.
Which brings us to the source of that duty, Arthur Graham.
Arthur Graham. He was one of the many wounded soldiers under her care, and he was, by all accounts, exceptionally popular. Bess even confessed to having a deeper affection for him than perhaps she should have. A genuine connection to the man she believed to be a hero.
But Arthur was fighting what she called a gallant but losing battle with death.
He was. His wound went septic almost overnight, a common and terrifying thing during the war, which meant his time was rapidly running out.
And it was in those final, desperate hours that he makes the promise that dictates the next 6 months of Bess's life.
Exactly. It was urgent, it was unwritten, and he stressed that it had to be delivered in person to his brother, Jonathan. He didn't use flowery language. He used stark, desperate words.
Tell Jonathan that I lied. I did it for Mother's sake, but it has to be set right.
And 2 hours later, Arthur was dead.
I lied. I did it for Mother's sake, but it has to be set right. I mean, when you hear that, your mind immediately goes to wartime secrets, doesn't it?
Of course. Did he lie about leaving a comrade? Did he lie about a tactical error?
But what was Bess's initial, maybe less sinister interpretation?
Well, initially, she did try to normalize it. She thought maybe he was covering up a relationship with a woman his mother disapproved of, or perhaps he exaggerated an act of bravery, the small white lies soldiers tell to maintain familial harmony or personal dignity.
But the intensity of his tone.
The intensity and the explicit command that it had to be set right slowly transformed those words in her mind from an ordinary vanity into something, as she put it, sinister. She felt the crushing weight of his unconfessed conscience.
And when she finally spoke to her father, the colonel, about this, she got this very measured, pragmatic response of an old military man.
Yes, classic old-school adherence to protocol. He confirmed that duty to the dead is sacred, that she absolutely must honor the soldier's final request. But he also advised patience and courtesy.
Right ahead, give the family notice, don't just rush in.
Exactly. He also offered those benign alternatives, trying to ease her worry that this was something truly terrible. What the colonel couldn't see, however, was that Bess needed this task, this concrete duty, to anchor herself after the Britannic disaster. She was already so highly sensitized to moral failing and the cost of delay.
So after weeks of painstaking convalescence, the arm healing stubbornly, the physical exercises she learned aboard the Britannic still necessary, she finally sets out.
It's late December 1916, near Christmas, and she travels to Kent, to the Graham family estate at Owlhurst, to confront Jonathan Graham, who was also home convalescing from a wound.
And the contrast here is so intentional and jarring. Bess is stepping from the harsh, morally clear environment of wartime service,
where duty means life or death,
into the soft, privileged, morally opaque world of the English gentry. Owlhurst is a bubble of wealth and tradition.
And she's met at the station by Robert Douglas, Mrs. Graham's cousin.
Robert Douglas. He's immediately presented as the ultimate English gentleman. Handsome, tall, has this immediate, effortless air of authority. Why is he such a critical character?
He is the pillar of the Graham facade. He lives in the house and has been the functional male head since Mr. Graham died, killed some years earlier, thrown from a bolting carriage horse.
So he represents stability.
Stability and conventional respectability. If there is a secret, Douglas is the man helping the family maintain the image. Bess should immediately be suspicious of anyone who seems too perfect in this morally compromised household.
Her first meeting with Mrs. Graham also kind of throws her expectations off balance.
Absolutely. Bess expected the mother Arthur was protecting to be either fragile or maybe domineering, a caricature of the wartime matriarch.
But instead,
she finds a tall, confident, and younger than expected woman with a strong, determined chin. Mrs. Graham speaks of Arthur with immense, almost performative warmth. She often seems to talk about him in the present tense, as if denial was a permanent state of being for her.
that confident denial is a huge indicator of her deep capacity for self-deception and control.
A huge one.
And the two surviving brothers, Jonathan and Timothy, they offer very different portraits of damaged privilege. So Jonathan is the one the message is for. What impression does he give Bess?
Jonathan is wounded and recovering, but Bess finds him instantly callous. Preoccupied, he just lacks the warmth Arthur was famous for. And a major red flag for Bess is his treatment of Ted Booker.
The local shell-shocked soldier.
Right. Jonathan disparaged Booker as a weakling and a malingerer, exhibiting a cold indifference to psychological suffering that Bess, fresh from the chaos of the Britannic and dealing with shell-shocked men constantly, finds profoundly troubling.
And Timothy, the younger brother.
Timothy carries a physical mark of difference. He was born with a club foot, which completely disqualified him from military service. And this is a massive source of resentment for him.
So he seems more open than Jonathan.
He appears open, perhaps more immediately friendly, but he carries the deep exclusion of not sharing that common wartime experience, a source of pain that the family, including his mother, likely never helped him reconcile. That physical disability and the resentment that comes from it, well, they become terrifyingly relevant later.
The actual delivery of the message is staged so perfectly to reflect the gravity of the contents.
It really is. She doesn't just blurt it out in the drawing room. She delivers it outside, in the cold, dead grass of the churchyard, right beside Arthur's new, shining memorial brass plaque.
It's the meeting of the sacred and the profane. She holds this dying man's conscience standing next to his memorial.
And she delivers the exact words. "Tell Jonathan that I lied. I did it for Mother's sake. But it has to be set right."
And Jonathan's reaction isn't confusion or grief.
No, it's impatience. Immediate dismissal. He claims total ignorance and tries to shut her down instantly.
But the immediate fallout, the moment Mrs. Graham enters the picture, that tells Bess everything she needs to know about the secret's true scope.
That's the critical insight.
Yeah.
Mrs. Graham confronts Bess, and her reaction is just too specific. She attempts to wave it away as, morphine-induced delirium, claiming, "I did it for Mother's sake." She already knows the precise content of the message.
And she goes on this whole tangent about how her sons were never involved with any local young women.
Exactly. Which is Bess's common working assumption for deathbed confessions. Mrs. Graham's intensity and the specific way she tries to deflect Bess confirms one thing. Jonathan had confided in his mother. The family was unified in dismissing the message. It was a collective decision to ensure this deep-seated secret remained buried.
It's a chilling moment of realization for Bess. She's dealing not with an individual conscience, but with an institutionalized cover-up.
It is.
And while she's processing this moral corruption, she is immediately pulled back to her professional duties, which brings her into closer contact with the village and with Ted Booker.
A fantastic bit of structural irony. The local doctor, Dr. Phillips, recognizes the efficiency in Bess's uniform. And, being short-handed, he just immediately recruits her. She goes from dealing with the moral failings of the gentry to the immediate, desperate physical needs of the working-class war veteran, Ted Booker.
And Booker is in a bad way.
He's suffering from severe shell shock. He had just received the news that his twin brother, Harry, was killed at the front, and he was threatening suicide with a shotgun.
Bess's intervention here is just. It's a masterclass in nursing skill, and a stark contrast to Jonathan's earlier callous dismissal of the same man.
She ignores the threat of the shotgun entirely. She doesn't engage in moralizing, she engages professionally. She talks him down by distracting him, focusing his mind on his need to help his wounded brother Harry, even though Harry was already dead, and she stabilizes him enough to get a sedative into him.
She completely disarmed him psychologically.
She did.
Yeah.
And that allowed Dr. Phillips to take the actual shotgun away. This earns her the doctor's immediate and lasting respect, but it also puts Booker's fragile state and his connection to the local gossip squarely on Bess's radar.
And just before that whole incident, Mrs. Graham had offered that seemingly innocent piece of local flavor about Owlhurst being a famous smuggling area.
With tunnels connecting the inn and the church tunnels, Arthur and his brothers had apparently searched for his children.
And that detail is more than just flavor, isn't it?
Oh, it's an analogy for the Graham family structure. Owlhurst is a place where secrets run deep, literally underground. The fact that the Graham boys searched for these hidden passages suggests a childhood fascination with secrecy and manipulation, which foreshadows the covert actions and hidden truths the family has relied upon for years to maintain their public face.
So Bess's original plan was to spend a day or two, deliver the message, and then leave. But the plot forces her to stay when the most controversial figure in the Graham family, the eldest son Peregrine, is brought home.
The timing here is critical. Robert Douglas delivers the emergency news. Peregrine, who has been institutionalized for years, is critically ill with pneumonia. The asylum is short-staffed because of the war, and they believe he is dying. So they are shipping him back to Owlhurst to die at home.
The family reaction is far more telling than any confession could have been.
Oh, absolutely. Jonathan just exclaims, "No." Mrs. Graham was grim, worrying specifically about the thoughts or memories it might trigger. This isn't just concern for a sick loved one. This is panic.
Panic about exposure.
Exactly. They were clearly worried not about his death, but about what Peregrine might say while he was dying.
And it's Robert Douglas, the voice of the family's public image, who convinces Mrs. Graham.
He does, suggesting it might be the best course. And you are meant to infer that perhaps a quiet death at home is preferable to anything Peregrine might accidentally reveal in the chaotic environment of an understaffed asylum.
And Bess, being utterly driven by duty, volunteers to stay and nurse him. It's what I do. She just throws herself into the task, turning a bedroom into an efficient, professional sickbay.
She goes into full wartime mode, Hot oils, poultices, constant care to combat the pneumonia. This tireless effort contrasts so beautifully with the Graham family's emotional detachment, and what she achieves is astonishing.
She stabilizes him.
She stabilizes him, and once the fever breaks, the man she finds is radically different from the one the family institutionalized.
The official story, based on the former rector's deposition, was that Peregrine had the mind of a child.
Right, but the man Bess nursed, though frighteningly weak, was coherent, rational, and mentally acute.
The contradiction is immediate and massive.
It is. Peregrine shocks Bess by expressing a very rational, very profound hatred. A pity it wasn't Jonathan who died rather than Arthur. I've hated him for years. This isn't the rambling of a simpleton. It's the specific, focused rage of a man who feels deeply wronged by his family.
And the source of that institutionalization, the London murder.
The gossip, which Susan's mother, Mattie West, confirmed was horrifying. Peregrine was accused of killing a London maid, Lily Mercer, when he was nearly 15, and Mrs. Graham had cemented the story. Peregrine had ripped that poor girl to pieces in an orgy of lust and blood, very like Jack the Ripper.
The family used those gory details to convince the authorities that he was a dangerous, non-rehabilitatable monster, justifying the asylum over prison. It's just astounding psychological cruelty.
It is. But Peregrine's hazy recollections start to reveal the family's mechanism of control. He admits he remembers the smell of blood, but not the act itself clearly. He thinks he was drugged or in shock.
But he recalls a specific conversation with his stepmother, Mrs. Graham.
A chilling one. She told him he had killed the girl the way he'd always wanted to kill her. This links the murder directly back to Peregrine's profound resentment of his stepmother, fueled by an earlier incident where he had buried his father's pocket knife in her pillow.
Wait, let's pause on that. The pocket knife in the pillow. That isn't just childish anger. That's deep, almost murderous resentment against the woman who had so clearly usurped his position in the family.
It demonstrates that Peregrine had the capacity for violence, driven by profound emotional conflict. And Mrs. Graham weaponized this capacity. She convinced him he was a monster by conflating his hatred for her with the murder of Lily Mercer.
But the real immediate secret that led to his institutionalization wasn't the murder itself, was it? It was something, well, far more conventional, yet equally scandalous.
It was. Peregrine realized that he was locked up not because he was dangerously mad, but because he was a truthful witness to the family's moral rot.
He had caught his stepmother, Mrs. Graham, in bed with Robert Douglas.
Exactly. The moment he tried to tell anyone this or question his own guilt, the family could easily dismiss it as the ravings of a certified lunatic. The asylum became the perfect tool of social control, ensuring that the Graham family's flawless public face remained intact forever.
So here is where the complexity truly starts. The cover-up wasn't just about protecting a brother from a murder charge. It was a multi-layered attempt to secure the family's social standing and protect the secret affair between the mother and her cousin, Robert Douglas.
And that's a common theme in the privileged class of this era, isn't it? Public decorum and appearance trump truth and justice every single time. Bess realizes she is facing not a crime of passion, but a calculated system of psychological and social manipulation.
The environment Bess is operating in is just intensely corrupt, and the first casualty after Peregrine's return is Ted Booker.
The shell-shocked soldier Bess had successfully stabilized. He stripped his bandages and succeeded in killing himself. Dr. Phillips immediately suspected Booker's hypercritical mother-in-law, Mrs. Denton, might have driven him to it. But Bess, having saved him just days earlier, felt a personal sting of failure and had to testify at the inquest.
And her testimony is an act of compassion, really. She protects the man from further stigma. She used her deep knowledge of psychological trauma to give the jury an out, suggesting he was confused, thinking he was returning to his unit, not intending suicide.
It was a beautiful act of moral duty, even if it obscured the truth for a moment. But Booker's death, seemingly suicide, is immediately added to the mounting evidence of unnatural events around the Graham family. It sets the stage for the massive breakthrough.
That breakthrough requires Bess to leave Owlhurst and follow the thread of the original London murder. This leads her to Rye to meet Mrs. Gadd, the widow of Inspector Gadd. And this is the fulcrum of the entire investigation.
This is the point where Bess's perception of Arthur, the hero, fundamentally collapses.
So what does Mrs. Gadd tell her?
Mrs. Gadd's revelation is the definitive aha moment. She remembers a piece of domestic gossip from the time of the murder. When Arthur, the beloved son, returned from London, his luggage was unpacked by Susan's mother, Mattie West.
The former housekeeper.
Right. And she found blood all along the cuff of Arthur's nightshirt. Arthur had claimed it was a nosebleed, and the family just accepted it.
That single piece of physical evidence suggests that Arthur was far closer to the murder than he ever let on.
It makes him the prime suspect for a brief, shattering moment. Arthur, the dead hero, might have been the actual killer, and Peregrine, the troubled stepson, the convenient scapegoat.
This is a moment Bess has to face the moral reality of the man she cared for.
Exactly. Arthur might have been brave on the battlefield, but in his personal life, he allowed an innocent, albeit deeply troubled person to be locked away to preserve his own reputation or his mother's peace. The courage demonstrated in war just doesn't redeem this fundamental failure of character.
And this theory that Arthur was involved, or at least covered up for someone, is immediately supported by the contradictory evidence regarding the nature of the murder itself.
Yes. When Bess's contact, Simon Brandon, her father's staff officer, investigates the official records, he finds that the police report cited only a pocket knife wound to the throat.
Which suggests a quick, fatal stab.
A quick kill. This directly contradicts the horrific, lurid details that Mrs. Graham and Susan's mother spread, the orgy of lust and blood, the Jack the Ripper mutilation.
So the evidence suggests the gruesome details were entirely invented.
They were invented to justify sending Peregrine away forever as an irredeemable monster, rather than dealing with the fact that he was simply a boy who stabbed a maid in a quick flash of anger.
So the family didn't just cover up the crime, they manufactured the pathology. They psychologically tortured Peregrine by convincing him he was a depraved monster.
It is psychological manipulation of the highest order, and it makes the Grahams, particularly Mrs. Graham, the true villains of the piece. They didn't just suppress the truth, they actively created a lie designed to destroy a person's identity and memory.
Desperate for a full confession, Bess then employs a really risky tactic. She takes Peregrine disguised in a stolen Lieutenant Phillips uniform to visit Mr. Appleby, the former tutor.
Appleby is the key to confirming the cover-up because he was there at the time.
And he represents the moral cowardice of the professional class.
Completely. He was terrified when they arrived. He admitted that he had seen Peregrine covered in blood, and so he believed him guilty at the time. But when Bess pressed him on why he never spoke up later, even his doubts must have arisen.
He confessed.
He confessed he enjoyed his comfortable position with the Graham family too much. He valued his secure salary and status over the life and freedom of a 15-year-old boy. His silence wasn't based on certainty, it was based on convenience.
The circle of complicity just keeps widening. Arthur, Mrs. Graham, Robert Douglas, Jonathan, and now the tutor, Mr. Appleby. But Peregrine, using his newfound lucidity and the former rector's journals, begins to piece together a far more terrifying pattern of retribution.
And this is where we need to dive deep into the pathology of the Graham family. Peregrine connects seemingly random deaths, accidents, suicides, to a childhood boast.
Jonathan bragging about being sly as a fox while stealing eggs.
Right, and Timothy, the clubfoot brother, insisted the dare must be completed 6 times to be fair. Peregrine hypothesized that one of his brothers, Timothy or Jonathan, was systematically eliminating anyone who had questioned the murder or acquiesced in his institutionalization, seeing it as a 6-part challenge.
This suggests an incredibly calculating, delayed form of psychopathy. It's so far removed from the quick flash of anger that killed Lily Mercer. Let's trace this pattern.
The pattern is chilling because the connection points are tenuous but consistent with a calculated long-term plan. First, Inspector Gadd. He died of a burst blood vessel while chasing a culprit at Herbert Meadows Farm, the exact location of Jonathan's egg-stealing boast.
That's a direct link.
Direct link. Second, Lady Parsons. She suffered a terrible fall from her horse. She was noted in the original record as being an initial uncomfortable questioner during the murder investigation. She needed silencing.
Number 3.
The former rector, Mr. Craig, died from a fall down the pulpit stairs. He provided the deposition that claimed Peregrine had the mind of a child, a crucial piece of testimony that enabled the cover-up, but one that could be potentially recanted.
Number 4 was the doctor.
Dr. Hadley, the former family doctor, found dead. He would have known the family's medical and psychological histories, making him a walking threat.
Okay, what about 5 and 6?
5 was Peter Mason, a promising local lad who drowned in a farm pond. Jonathan had found the body. The connection is less clear, but Peregrine suspected he might have witnessed something related to the original crime or a later cover-up effort. And number 6, Ted Booker,
The shell-shocked soldier.
whose death Bess had just witnessed. While it looked like a suicide, the family's cold dismissal of him suggests they knew his instability could lead him to inadvertently reveal secrets or cause unwanted attention.
6 deaths spread over a decade, all linked by proximity to the Grahams or knowledge of the original crime. That kind of cold, calculated execution, hidden behind the facade of accidents, it's perhaps more disturbing than the initial murder.
It is. It reveals that the rot runs deep, manifesting as a long-term pathological obsession. And it raises the central question: which brother Jonathan, the callous soldier, or Timothy, the resentful, excluded clubfoot, was the true, calculating mind behind the 6 accidents?
So Bess needs to confirm Peregrine's mental state before she can act decisively. She decides on this horrific psychological test, taking him to a butcher shop in Rochester.
It was a desperate, high-risk maneuver. She needed to know if he was truly the Ripper-like monster the family claimed, or simply a deeply traumatized boy. Confronted with bloody offal, the test results were violent and immediate. Peregrine experienced a catastrophic, visceral flashback.
He believed he was touching Lily Molster's entrails, crying out in delusion. But his words during the delusion are the key to his sanity.
Exactly. He cries out, "I am my father's son," which is more than my brothers can say.
And this proves 2 things at once. First, the trauma is real and profoundly debilitating. It confirms the emotional reality of his pain.
But second, his core identity is intact. The detail of the horrific mutilation was implanted by Mrs. Graham. But his internal core, his pride in being his father's son, was rational. He was traumatized, not psychopathic.
Knowing she had a rational man on her hands, but one still in grave danger, Bess seeks temporary sanctuary for Peregrine at her relative's home, Melinda Crawford. But the small, comfortable betrayal of the tutor, Appleby, sets the stage for the violent conclusion.
Appleby, nursing a grudge after being humiliated by Bess, recognized the unique vehicle of Melinda's driver, Ram, and maliciously alerted Jonathan to Peregrine's location. Jonathan, whose orders for France had just arrived, immediately drove to Melinda's house, determined to recapture his brother and return him to the asylum before he had to leave for the front.
This sets up the brutal climax. Jonathan seizes Peregrine and drives toward the asylum with 2 constables. Bess pursues them.
Near the asylum field, the pursuit culminates in gunfire. Peregrine had managed to secure Jonathan's pistol. Bess arrives to find the Graham car wrecked. 1 constable is dead, Jonathan is badly wounded, and Peregrine is shot in the shoulder.
And crucially, Bess catches a glimpse of a figure.
A figure similar in build to Jonathan, but clearly not him, running away from the scene: Timothy.
Jonathan, believing himself to be dying, makes a final, shocking confession to Bess. He claims he fired the shots trying to kill the constables and Peregrine. This is the second major lie of the narrative, mirroring Arthur's original lie.
It's the ultimate act of desperate fraternal loyalty, and it perfectly echoes Arthur's initial motivation. Jonathan knew that Peregrine was now cleared and that Timothy was the true culprit who had just fired the shots. Jonathan, convinced he was dying, sacrificed his name and his reputation to ensure Timothy could escape and be protected.
He died, or was near death, believing he was saving his brother one last time.
He did.
But the truth, held by Mrs. Graham for over a decade, finally explodes into the open as she arrives and sees her 2 surviving sons critically injured.
Distraught beyond self-control, Mrs. Graham confesses her greatest sin. Lily Mercer was killed by Timothy.
And the motivation was so terrifyingly simple and sad.
It was. Lily, teaching Timothy his letters, had mocked his clubfoot, calling him the Devil's Club. Timothy, overwhelmed by the shame and resentment tied to his disability, lashed out with a pocket knife and killed her.
The motive for the entire decade-long cover-up, the sacrifice of Peregrine, the destruction of the witnesses, was pure, blind, selfish, maternal protection of her disabled son, Timothy.
And the House of Cards collapses entirely in the immediate aftermath. While Jonathan and Peregrine were being rushed to the hospital, Timothy was found hanging from a tree in the churchyard.
He was the final 6th accident in the gruesome pattern. Only this time, it was self-inflicted retribution.
Yes. With Timothy's suicide and Jonathan's critical injuries, the secret was undeniable. Bess's final duty, then, is to synthesize everything and finally understand Arthur's deathbed message once and for all.
She returns to the churchyard, to Arthur's memorial brass, and connects the final dots. Arthur's message. Tell Jonathan that I lied. I did it for Mother's sake, but it has to be set right.
Right. So what was the original lie Arthur had committed?
It was to protect Jonathan. When the family discovered Lily Mercer dead and saw Timothy's involvement, Jonathan, perhaps fearing the consequences for his younger brother, stepped in.
And claimed the murder weapon, the pocket knife, belonged to him when it actually belonged to Arthur.
Exactly. And Arthur allowed this lie to stand, thereby protecting Timothy by letting Jonathan take the initial, more palatable blame for the cover-up. Arthur went off to war, perhaps believing he could never be exposed, but his conscience tortured him.
He realized that Peregrine, the innocent stepson, was suffering the ultimate injustice, and that was the thing that had to be set right.
The irony is just devastating. Arthur and Jonathan both committed massive moral sacrifices, lies, and near-death confessions, all out of this twisted sense of familial duty.
Ultimately motivated by protecting the weakest, most pathological member of their family, Timothy, and upholding their mother's self-serving peace. It reveals a level of toxic loyalty that is terrifying. They were all willing to burn their own lives to maintain the mother's delusional, perfect family portrait.
It really proves just how suffocating the pressure of societal expectation can be on the English gentry. So we have mapped the timeline, navigated the layers of cover-up, and seen the brutal, tragic climax. Let's look at the immediate aftermath and the key takeaways.
Justice, though violently achieved, was served. Peregrine was cleared of the murder charge and finally sent to a hospital, not for madness, but to heal from his gunshot wound and the decade of profound psychological abuse inflicted by his stepmother.
And Mrs. Graham.
Stripped of her sons and her social standing, she was sent back to her family in utter disgrace. Jonathan, miraculously, survived his critical injury, though he carried a severe scar, a physical reminder of his final sacrificial lie.
And Peregrine, the boy who was psychologically erased by his family, found his way back. We get the final hopeful note months later, in March 1917.
Yes, when Bess receives a small postcard while serving in France. It was from her friend Diana, confirming that Peregrine was now Lieutenant Graham, completing his training, and posted to Dover Castle.
And the final, most satisfying detail, he was taking over the Dower House in Owlhurst.
Which signifies the reclamation of his name, his status, and his life as the rightful eldest son and heir. Bess's duty to the dead was fulfilled, restoring justice to the living.
It is a phenomenal investigation, but it came at a high moral cost to Bess, forcing her to confront the reality that the hero she idealized, Arthur, was fundamentally flawed.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. Bess had been genuinely fond of Arthur Graham, the brave, blue-eyed soldier who fought a gallant battle and died a hero. But that hero allowed a terrible injustice to stand, sacrificing his innocent half-brother Peregrine for the sake of his mother's comfort and Timothy's freedom.
And he only sought to set it right when faced with his own mortality.
Exactly. So we have to ask ourselves, is the bravery demonstrated in the extraordinary circumstances of war enough to redeem a fundamental years-long failure of character and moral courage when faced with the essential, painful truth? It makes you question whether true heroism lies in the act of fighting or the willingness to dismantle a destructive lie, regardless of the cost to one's own family reputation.